butterfly and sting like a bee.
Buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti a una seconda puntata di Sting Like a Bee e come promesso oggi con noi abbiamo Thomas Seeley. Abbiamo fatto delle promesse all'inizio della trasmissione, adesso le manteniamo, quindi dovete sintonizzarvi e portare un po' di pazienza. E come vi dicevo, se magari non ci sentite bene me lo potete dire. Comunque sia, se avete domande scrivetele pure in chat, ok? Hello Mr. Seeley.
Good afternoon or good evening.
Pleasure
to be with you.
You like our video theme, video songs? Sting like a bee. The motto is very strange. It's very strange.
Like a butterfly. Sting like a bee.
It's the first time I understand that you make this type of transmission.
Yes, that's correct.
We're going to speak about the bees, Mr. Seeley. So, we want to change the mentality of the beekeepers. This is a... You hear me? Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, okay. So, we're going to speak about the bees. And I want to start with a question. Maybe is the first question is the most important because I can say that maybe all your career starts with this question. No, how did you start to get passionate about the bees in the world of the beekeeping?
I got started with my fascination in honeybees when I was 10 years old.
Oh.
And I had the good fortune of watching a swarm move into a hollow tree near where my parents had our home. And it was only about, the knothole that they were going into was about 3 meters off the ground. So even though I was still just a boy, I could get pretty close to the bees and watch them closely. And I knew nothing about them, but it was fascinating to see thousands and thousands of bees descending on this tree and then very quickly and very beautifully walking into that knothole, which was their new home.
I understand. I can say that it's love that has... it's very old, so... Come un matrimonio di lunga data. Il matrimonio, it's... how can I say, the relation between wife and husband? It's I don't remember the word. It's we can say it's a marriage. It's a marriage with the bees far away.
Yes, it certainly sparked my fascination because there was clearly a lot going on with all those bees going into that tree, but it was, once they were inside, it was hidden. And so that's much mystery. And I often went back and watched them, and I saw some things like the bees standing at the entrance, fanning their wings, and I certainly saw bees coming and going, but it was really a mystery what was going on there. And I have to say that mystery has underlined it's been the foundation of my scientific work. What's going on in the bee colony?
And you go home and say to your father, I want to be a beekeeper. something like that.
No, I wasn't that alert and quick in my thinking. What I did do is I went home and I borrowed a ladder so I could get up close to the bees and look at them closely. But it wasn't until about 6 years later that I again saw a swarm, and now I was old enough to realize, oh, you could put those bees in a box and bring them home, and that's how I got my first colony of bees. I went home, built quickly built a wooden box, a simple hive, shook the bees into it, and brought them home. And at this point, I could I could open up the box and I could look at the bees as they were building their combs and guarding the nest, fanning, ventilating the nest. That's when I really got started.
And you have participate. You have a you took as a student a beekeeping course or not?
No, I didn't. What I did after I caught that wild swarm and put it in a box, I went to the public library and I got out every book that they had on bees and beekeeping. There were maybe 6 or 7, and I just read those, and I just found my way, and I didn't really know well what I was doing, but I figured out a lot. Of course, there's a lot of good books on beekeeping.
Yes, I know. Yes. So we can say that Thomas Seeley doesn't have participate on a course of beekeeping.
That's correct. But at the same time, I had a kind of course in that in my last year of high school, that would have been when I was 17, I talked my way into working as a summer helper at the laboratory for honeybee studies here at Cornell University. And, my job was just like sweep the floor, empty the waste baskets, mow the lawn, mow the grass. But I did get to help with some of the beekeeping. And as you know, it's when you observe somebody who is an expert doing the beekeeping manipulations, then you learn it very quickly.
Yes, it's true. It's true. You understand very, very well how beekeeping it's working when you work with a beekeeper. So it's very true. It's very true. And if you know the beekeepers that are you say that you help a beekeeper. You know that the beekeepers are person that prove something new always. They want to make always some changing. You was a guy that follow the books, or you try something new always like the others.
That's a really interesting question. I'm trying to think back how it worked. I think because I knew so little, I really did follow what I was shown, and I did read the books carefully, and I probably did follow the books closely. But my goal from the outset was to understand the bees, not to become a super duper beekeeper.
Okay.
I did develop. I kept for a while an apiary of about 20 colonies, and I would produce hundreds of kilograms of honey, which I would sell from a little honey stand. So I did become a beekeeper I've been a beekeeper for more than 50 years. But I have to say, my real fascination with the bees is their social behavior. You look inside a hive and all these bees are doing things, and somehow it all works. They work together to build the nest, the combs, collect the food, keep everything clean, rear the young. That's what really fascinates me. Not getting the honey crop, but understanding the bees.
You are a little bit like me, because I don't like honey. I like bees. We are the same on this argument. I'm happy to hear say these things, because for example, here in Italy, every time when we speak about the bees and we speak about the beekeeper, the first question is how many honey crop do you produce this year? No, it's not. They don't ask you if when you start beekeeping, why do you have the bees? they ask you honey. You make
Yeah.
how much honey you make, no? And
Yeah.
like for example, the bee.
Is that?
No,
I
no.
wonder if that's because honey, for most people, people who are not beekeepers, honey is very precious and it's so delicious. I think that they're probably curious about, gosh, he's a beekeeper. He or she has his own supply of honey. I wonder how
Yes.
much he or she makes.
How much he eats
Yes.
of honey, no? They think that we eat a kilo of honey every day. So
Yeah. I
it's
know some people that come close.
okay. And I think that this question, how many honey you make, it is because the people don't the person don't understand this work of beekeeper, because also they see always they imagine a beekeeper that it's he stay with the bees. It's very very nice, the nature. You don't get sting. You don't work a lot. They don't know the reality that the beekeeper and the beekeeping, it's a very very hard work of study first of all, and also you need to manage the colony, because sometimes we speak about the last time. The people sometimes say, okay, you need to pick the bees and let the bees outside because they resolve all the problem. This is not beekeeping. We speak last time. I think that it's this is the problem. The person, they don't know about nothing about beekeeping and the bees, no. But we can change this mentality at school, not when you are made mature. So
Yeah, I agree that I think people don't, unless you are a beekeeper, you don't realize how complex a craft that it is. You really have to know your organism, and you have to know the weather. You have to know the environment. Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about beekeeping, is it really puts you in touch with the natural world.
it's true.
And the natural world is complicated.
Very very complicated. And so we continue. We said that you start beekeeping at very at 10 years. No, you see the first swarm, and then you make the study. I know that you have write 5 books. I'm correct?
Yes, that's right.
5 books. We're gonna speak, if you want, we can speak a little bit about all the books that you wrote, and to understand how they are connected together. Because I think that I read all your books, and I see that how can I say, you speak about the bees on what we see inside the colony of the bees, and after, for example, with the last book, you speak about how the honeybees, how the colony it's interact with the natural world, when they seek home or this stuff here. I think that your first book is Honeybee Ecology.
Let's see, I've lost the sound.
You hear me?
Yeah, I did. I lost it for a second. I'm sorry.
I think that your first book is Honeybee Ecology. It's true?
Yeah, that's right. That was the first book, and the aim of that book was to review I thought really for the first time, what we knew about the natural history of Apis mellifera. there are there are thousands and thousands of books on beekeeping,
Yes.
but very few on the biology, and none before that on the natural lives, the ecology of Apis mellifera. So that's what that first book was about, and it uh, seemed, I knew that it was, I was young when I wrote that book, so it was a good start. I'd have to say it was a good start. And it presented that perspective of the honeybee is not a domesticated animal. It is still an animal that can live in the wild and is perfectly well adapted to doing so. And that, I think, is an important message. That book was, and it's the only book I've ever written in this way, was written specifically for biologists. And I realized in writing that book that if I write any other books, which I did, I wanted to make those books accessible for beekeepers as well as biologists.
Yes, so yes. I remember that it's, I can say, a book a little bit complicated because you speak about the queen, the genetics of the queen, how they mate. It's very interesting, but I can say that a beekeeper like me, when you read a book like this one, it's you understand very, very much about the bees. How can I say, something new? It's this book. It's diverse. For example, it's not like the other books. It's a new type of book. How can I say?
Yes, that's. Thank you. That's exactly what it is. It's not saying here's the bee. How do we keep it? How do we manipulate it? It's a book that says, here's the bee. Look at the honeybee the way you would look at a wild bird. Just look at what is its biology. What is its natural way of life?
Yes. And the second book is The Wisdom of the Hive.
Yeah, that book is about what I call this social physiology of honeybees, how colonies work. Like it addresses the mysteries of physiology, how they and we know those mysteries from our own body, where we have the physiology of blood flow and food digestion and everything else. Those same sort of issues of physiology, or how the mechanics of the system works, those apply very much to a colony of honeybees. A honeybee colony, as you well know, is a kind of organism. We call it a superorganism because it's not made of cells, it's made of little bees.
Yes.
But it has the same issues of needing to acquire food, keep itself warm, circulate fresh air into it, take out waste, all of those things. So the wisdom of the hive is looking at the wisdom of how a colony works, its inner workings, and I focused on a part of the biology that was the most accessible for me at the time, and it was the process whereby a colony collects its food and water.
Yes.
So that's what that book is about.
You have write a book little by little. No, you start with the colony. For the biologist, you can then you spoke about how the bees pick the pollen and the nectar and so on. And after you have write a honeybee democracy that I can say it's a bestseller in all the world, because everyone that I know, they have read this book. You are the Stephen King of in the good part.
Well, thank you very much. It is that book is popular because it tells such an amazing story, and it's really that it still astounds me that the scout bees in a honeybee swarm have such behavioral sophistication that they can organize themselves into making this democratic or collective decision about the new home site. And they do it in such a way that we know is almost the single most powerful way to do it, of where the scouts locate multiple potential home sites,
Yes, it's
report them, and then run this competition among themselves. It's a friendly competition because they're all in the same swarm, they're all in the same situation. But then they have all these nifty little tricks of their behavior and their social interactions, so that the site that is the best becomes the one that is chosen. It is utterly amazing, and I can understand why it's fascinating to people, because it's just fascinating to me. And I didn't, we have to acknowledge that there was a gentleman in Germany named Martin Lindauer who really started this line of investigation. He only had very simple tools, but we have to give him credit for recognizing that honeybees use their waggle dance to advertise home sites as well as food sources, and that got the whole story started.
I see, and I can say that I see that the German people, they study a lot of the bees and the beekeeping, and I read some interesting things about the bees in Germany, and we're gonna have some people from Germany that they gonna speak about the bees. And I remember when I read the first time the Honeybee Democracy, it was in English, no? And I can say that after I finished this book, you see the colony in a other how can I say, in another matter. You see the colony, the idea that you have, the way that you have of thinking about a bee colony after you read this book is gonna change. Because
interesting. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes, because for example, no, all the book that we say that we have a lot of books that they speak about the bees and how can you manage the beekeeper, the bees. In this book, they say, okay, the bees, they need to swarm. You need to make this stuff. You need to make this stuff here. With your book, you don't say the bees, they need to swarm. You say, okay, the bees, they are swarming. But inside a bee colony, inside a swarm, you're gonna see this type of organization. Okay, for example, all the dances, the scout bees that search a new home, and inside this home she walks about I remember 15 meters, a little bit more maybe.
Yeah.
For a little insect like this, it's a thing, it's a wonderful thing. All this the communication that the bees have, it's very strange. And I see that in the Honeybee Democracy you have described very, very well all the things that we're gonna see inside a swarm. We can say that I think that all the people that have bees and read your book, when they see a swarm, they gonna go like that. Oh my God, I want to see if the book is right or not.
Yeah, and as you know, the waggle dance is just one of the signals they use. They've got shaking signals and piping signals and buzz runs because they have to not only make a decision about where the new home will be, but once they've made that decision, then they have to organize the swarm's move to the new home. And that takes a lot of fancy signaling too, different kinds of signals.
Yes, yes. And after you read this book, I see also that you start to have very many questions in your head because you say, okay, oh my God, it's not only a swarm, it's a colony.
Mm-hmm.
This colony decide. If we think about the life of the bees in a forest, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we all the study that we read that we make, it's they are done with the hives that we know the Langstrong, the Dadant, etc. When we read this book, we say, but in nature this stuff are changing, because for example we have our apiary, okay, we have the apiary. We know that the bees, if they want to come home, they remember where is the home and enter in the hive. But if the bee colony lives in a forest,
Yes.
it's very, very, very large, and the bees understand where is the home. It's not the apiary. It's one. It's one. Okay, one home,
one little opening in one tree in the
one
middle of a
tree
wood.
in the middle of the wood. It's you know how they can you know something about this? How can they how they know the home where is in the forest?
Yeah, that is, we know a lot about how bees orient back to their home or out to a patch of flowers. We know a lot about this based on the studies of Karl von Frisch. He is the German scientist in the early half of the 20th century. We know him he's most famous for his discovery and analysis of the honeybee's waggle dance, but he studied also very intensively how bees find their way out to patches of flowers and then find their way back home. He learned, for example, that they use the sun as a directional reference. He learned how they measure the distance that they've flown. He learned that even if a bee makes a flight out to a target where she doesn't fly straight to the target, she can keep track of the different legs of her journey and then add them up in a sense to know, okay, this is my net displacement. This is my net movement from my home. And I just need to reverse that. It's like she has an imaginary arrow that she knows that got her out to that patch of flowers. And then she just flies back down that imaginary arrow to get back to her home. Those were things that were studied closely by Karl von Frisch and some of his students.
How much do you think that we have studied about the bees, and how much we need to discover?
Oh, tough question there, Cristian. Hard to put a number on it. Well, let's focus, say, just on what. Here's one way to address that question, because it's a very challenging question. Let's say, how many of the communication signals of honeybees have humans identified and deciphered? And there's two main categories of their communication signals. One category is chemical signals, and there I think we've probably identified maybe half of them, if that. And then there's another set of signals which are mechanical or acoustical. They involve sound or comb vibrations. And there, I think, again, we've probably got about half of them worked out.
Oh my God.
So So I mean, I hear bees making sounds that I don't know why the bee is doing that. I know it's a distinct sound, um, and but I know it can be solved. It's a mystery that can be solved. So, but to answer your question, maybe about 50% of the inner workings.
Oh my god, a little bit.
Yeah.
It's very strange because
There's
we live in a world, in a modern world. We have all the things that we need, but when we speak about the animals and insects and other things, we understand very very little. It's very strange.
Well, it's a different world. I mean, they live in a world of odors that we're not sensitive to. So we're basically blind to a lot of their communications,
Yes.
and they use a lot of subcomb vibrations, and we can't hear those at all either. So unless unless you equip the comb with a special little vibrometer microphone, so we can tap into them, but it's slow and it's painstaking work, but it's also very rewarding, as you know.
Yes, 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 yes. And we can speak about the other book, the Following the Wild Bees. You have, I see that you have always write a book, a unique book. No, for example, the Following the Wild Bees. It's a thing that I can say it's marvelous because also this type. You see the bees, you put it in the little box, you give the bees some nutrition, and you see where is the home of the bees.
Yeah,
And
you track her back to her home.
it's very strange. I know that it's we have a lot of history regarding the hive hunters. You can tell us more how you start to write this book.
Well, yeah. Oh, thank you. I guess I'll say that I will. Whenever I start writing a book, I try to identify what the book's purpose is, and the purpose of this book is to give people who are interested in honeybees, especially beekeepers, another way to relate to the bees that they admire so much. So instead of going up to a hive of bees and you open it up, you're confronted with thousands of bees. When you do the process of bee hunting, which is, as you described, is a process where you capture a bee on a flower, introduce her to some food, and then learn from her the direction and distance to her home, and then you go find her home, be it a hive or a bee tree. When you do that, you're working with individuals, often one bee at a time, or at most maybe 5 or 6 bees at a time. So I wrote this book to show people that here's another way to have fun with bees, and here's another way to learn about bees, and especially about their behavior, because that's what you're studying. You're looking at how a bee flies out, loads up, flies home, brings nestmates. and I wanted to, I guess basically I wanted to show, in essence, I wanted to show people another way to think about bees, not just as these cool insects that live inside wooden boxes, but insects that roam across the countryside, far away, to collecting their food, traveling out and traveling home.
Yes, I understand.
That's why the title is Following the Wild Bees, Following them home.
You know that this title, The Wild Bees, it's, how can I say, a little bit hard for the association of the beekeepers that they affirm that the wild bees doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's a strange. I don't know how that idea ever got got established that the wild colonies don't exist.
We need to ask them.
I think they extrapolated from experiencing high mortality of their colonies when Varroa arrived, and they thought, and in fact I did too, that gosh, if the colonies that I'm caring for are dying from Varroa, and the virus is spread by the Varroa, well, and certainly the colonies out in the wild must be dying even more because they're not getting any help. So I think that's why people have assumed that often the colonies that are living wild or on their own had died off, but that turned out not to be the case.
Maybe it's the first time when the beekeepers and all the people, they think that they know better the bees and how they can manage themselves, and maybe for this they affirm that the wild bees doesn't exist. No.
Yeah, I think that probably is part of it, that they, it's not. Yeah, I think I can't speak for beekeepers in general, but I do think probably a lot of beekeepers think that they are really helping, taking care of their bees, and certainly a beekeeper can. If a colony is close to starvation, a beekeeper can provide food.
Yes.
If a swarm hasn't cold, rainy weather, the beekeeper can put it in a shelter, into a hive. So there's a lot of good things beekeepers can do. But I think it is important for all beekeepers to remember that they're still dealing with basically a wild animal.
Yes, it's a wild animal that he managed by himself. So I think also that we, like beekeepers, we like to think that we are like Superman for the bees. No, we help all the colony, and if the beekeeper doesn't exist, the bees will die, and it's a little bit for us, no, because we are a little bit important. If we are more important if we think that the bees cannot live without the beekeepers.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I know as a beekeeper, you have your hives of bees, and you see every year that some fraction of them die.
Yes.
And so, it's easy to think then that I've had 20% die, even though I've been helping them. It must be even much worse for colonies that aren't getting help from a human being.
Yes.
So, but what we all overlooked, all of us, including me, for many years, is the power of natural selection. That the bees that are out in the wild, a lot of them might be dying, but there's some that some are surviving, and those are the ones that are keeping things going in the wild.
We need to change the mentality. This is the first thing, and maybe we need to learn more about beekeeping from the bees. Maybe, I think.
I think so too, and yeah, it's an interesting. People have been keeping bees for thousands of years. There's the Roman. There are very beautiful writings from, I've forgotten his name right now, a Roman farmer who wrote in great detail about what hives you should use, how you should treat the bees in the winter, and things like that. Columella. I'm not sure I'm saying it right, but how do you pronounce the name?
I don't think that it's the same. Columella, maybe.
Columella, yes,
something like that.
Yeah. So, people have been keeping bees for a long time, and so I think they probably have, and they had lost touch for nobody had really monitored colonies in the wild to see how they were doing until we started doing that in the 1970s. So this is all new stuff. And so I think it's understandable why beekeepers feel that they're kind of like farmers, and some people call themselves bee farmers, where they have, if you keep chickens or pigs or cows, they don't do so well in the wild. Sheep can do well. Sheep and goats can do that. So they're, but I think people carry over from normal farming or animal husbandry practice the view that the human is essential in the life of the animals.
I don't understand how that we change our methods of making beekeeping, because we start with the old beekeeping. No, how can I say, with the skips and this stuff here, that we can say that it's natural beekeeping with the skips. No,
it was,
and we have changed all the modality of the beekeeping to have very big problems, and now we prove to go back to the natural beekeeping. It's very strange. We maybe we have torn. It's wrong. No,
when the movable frame hive was invented by Langstroth and others in other parts of the world, it was invented in Russia too. That changed the relationship between humans and bees. Humans could now go into the nests of the bees and could be far more manipulative of the lives of honeybees.
Yes.
And in some ways that seemed good for the beekeepers because they could make more honey and they could manage them. They could devise all sorts of beekeeping methods that make colonies bigger and stronger and better honey producers. But it also did create problems of disease transmission.
Yes.
And particularly, it used to be American foul brood was really serious, and beekeepers didn't know that at first, so they could move combs with the disease from one colony into another colony because they were movable. So yeah, I think it has been valuable for us to step back and go back and learn the natural history. And if you look at other agricultural animals, you can see the similar scenario that happened with honeybees. If you look at dairy cows, for example, they are now they're highly manipulated. They're constrained, at least in America. They can spend their whole life within the barn where they get fed and they just make milk. They don't live very long. They're not very strong. They make lots and lots of milk. So that's, and they're bred very strongly. They're bred, and that's what agricultural pursuit favors, is having animals that are really productive, but not necessarily very healthy. And with honeybees, we sort of went down that track as well. And we're still on it because the way we manage our colonies for honey production leads to colonies that are generally very vulnerable to pathogens and parasites.
Yes.
So,
yes.
But we
need to change.
That's right. We have room to change. It's a matter of decision. And that's one of the things that gives me a lot of hope basically for honeybees, is that more and more beekeepers are recognizing that they can have a different aim with their beekeeping. It's not honey production. It might be just enjoying the presence of a colony of bees in their life, just as if you have a dog, you don't expect the dog to do much for you except be a friendly companion.
Yes.
And and so I think it's I I don't know what percentage of beekeepers want that natural beekeeping approach versus the honey production beekeeping approach or the crop pollination approach. But I sense it's at least 20% of beekeepers in North America, and I don't know what it would be in other countries, but I'm encouraged that there is that interest in looking at honeybees, not just as a means of production of honey or pollination services.
Yes, you're right. I can say that the main problem is also that when you open a beekeeping business, you need to make honey or pollen, all
Mhm.
this stuff here. But you have hundreds of possibilities that you can make with the bees, and you can have a business with the bees not making honey.
Mhm.
The people, they
Mhm.
don't understand this. The beekeepers, they don't understand this thing here, because all the business plan that they have is focus on the production of the honeybees, of the honey. But
Yeah.
you have also other things that you can make with the bee colony. So maybe
Mhm.
it's how you start your business and what do you want. You say you you say also this type of things. What do you want from the bees? If you want the honey, you make a business like that. If you make courses, you send bees, all the stuff here, it's another thing.
Mhm. Are there beekeepers in Italy that take care of hives of bees for people that don't want to be beekeepers but want some bees in their at their house?
No, no. Someone, yes, but it's not a large number.
Yeah,
Uh,
that would be a parallel to being people working as gardeners, and not because the garden is going to produce food, but because people just enjoy the
yes,
plants around their. And likewise, I know some people keep bees just because they enjoy having a hive of bees outside their home where they can go out and watch it, just as they put out a bird feeder. It's a way of looking at the wildlife.
it's a bee watching. It's not a bird watching. It's a bee watching.
That's right. And bee watching is different from beekeeping.
Yes, yes, it's true. It's true. And we have arrived on the Life of the Bees, your latest book. But I know that
Uh-huh.
is not the latest one, because you write a new book in 2022. Yes, it's true.
Yes, yes,
When
it's good. And
you
mhm.
decide to, I make another question. When you understand that you need to write a book about the bees and what a natural colony of bees needs for surviving.
Yeah, what motivated me to write the book, The Lives of Bees, was a sense that I knew a lot. I know a lot because it's been my life's work about how bees live in the wild. But a lot of that information is hidden away in the scientific journals. And I knew that unless I write it out in a book and in a um, well organized way that also refers to the work of many, many other people over decades, if not hundreds of years, that it would get lost. Nobody, because I didn't know of anybody else that wanted to write, to summarize, review what we know about the lives of bees as they live in nature. That was my goal.
Okay. And how did how did the scientific world take over the birth of the Darwinian beekeeping, of the natural beekeeping?
The scientific world, I think it's a little hard for me to say because I don't really ask people about that, but it does get cited, and there are many other people that have developed these ideas beyond what I proposed. There's a groups in Germany and the Netherlands and in England, um, and uh, and it goes. And there's a new journal called Natural Bee Husbandry that addresses it. So it's these are just different. They're different. The term Darwinian beekeeping was just my way of putting a label on this approach to beekeeping, but other people have. But it's just one of several names that's used for it, and it's definitely a work in progress. It's because this is, I mean, we know the outlines of it. We know that first and foremost, you want to work with locally adapted bees.
Yes.
Then you want to put them in the right kind of hive, one that's well insulated, has rough inner surfaces, is about 40 or 50 liters, like a natural nest, not like a big honey producing hive. And then you want to put it in the right place, a clean environment where the hives are spaced widely, and you want to handle the bees in a pretty gentle, light-handed way. So, but there's a lot of different labels for this, and I'm glad to see that. I guess I'm just happy, whether people want to call it Darwinian beekeeping or whatever. I'm glad that there's many people that are writing about this and discussing it, and that's really good because how you do it is going to be different if you're in Italy or if you're in Ireland,
Yes.
or you're in England or in Germany or in Spain. it's yeah.
And how was it taken by the beekeepers? Because you changed the world of the beekeepers. Because when you say you need to use an ecotype, you need to have this type of wood. You need to put the colonies inside this type of nature. How did the beekeepers? What some beekeepers they say you it's not true, or they don't say nothing.
Most look at it and see it as an alternative way to be a beekeeper and decide it's not for them. So, but like I say, I think there's about 20% out there who are interested in it because they say they know that they like the bees more for the bees being part of their lives than for giving them big honey crops. They like a little honey, but they don't need 50 pounds of honey from 25 kilograms of honey from a hive. That's more honey than they know what to do with.
Yes.
So it's been a very, very mixed. And I knew from the get-go this would be a message that would be relevant to only some people, and even the people that are small-scale commercial beekeepers, a lot of them integrate some of these ideas into their beekeeping, but don't embrace it. Don't embrace it fully because they want their hobby to pay for itself. So they want to produce enough honey to pay for their hobby, and that's fine too. And it's like it's like if you take care of dogs, you could have dogs for racing them, or you could have them just as a pet. It's different. You have a sheepdog, it's a working dog. So we humans relate to our animals different in various ways.
Yes, you think that the situation of the beekeeping today, that is worse, I can say, can become even worse if we don't change the way of doing beekeeping?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I haven't, I haven't. Let me think. I'm going to think for a little bit about that. Uh, I'm not sure it will get worse, but it's not going to get any better unless people make some adjustments. And I think one of the things that people are, what beekeepers, even ones that want to be commercial beekeepers, want to make some money from their bees, one thing that is I think is being widely and easily accepted is the idea of working with locally adapted bees. And there and that's is I think there are many people that endorse that. One group that I've worked with most recently that endorses it in full strength is the Irish Beekeepers Association, where they're very proud of their Apis mellifera mellifera, the black bee
Yes.
that's adapted to Ireland, and they haven't imported many of the other races of bees, so they've got it's like 98% pure. They've got and those bees they do really marvelous or striking things. They forage even when it's raining lightly, when it's cool, um, and uh, and they do really well in that cool climate of by the ocean, the North Atlantic Ocean of Ireland.
Yes.
So there's one group that embraces it. I know there are beekeepers in England that want to get locally adapted bees, ones that have not only locally adapted but also maybe varroa tolerant bees from the
Yes.
wild.
Yes.
And I know in the Netherlands there are beekeepers as well, and certainly in France. So it's not gonna it's gonna be it's gonna be the embrace of Darwinian beekeeping will be or the rejection of it will be as varied as human beings are and as varied as people's
Yes.
motives for being beekeepers.
Yes, yes. I the only thing that I want to say is that for example, some beekeeping association they say that we need, and also you, they say that here in Italy, for example, now they say that we need to work with a local bee. It's true.
Mm.
It's true. It's very true. But nobody speaks about or our agriculture, how the natural world of the bees here in Italy, for example,
Yeah.
is. So it's very strange because in a side we have the beekeepers that say, okay, we need to work with a local type of bee, but we don't need to change the environment of the bees. This is you hear me?
Oops, I lost you.
You
For
hear
about
me?
30 seconds, I didn't hear. I'm sorry.
I say that in a side by a side we have the beekeepers that say we need to work with a local bee, but they don't speak about the situation of the natural world in where the bees are living. And if if we don't change our mentality or our agriculture, we cannot save the bees because the bees eat the things that they have in nature.
Yeah, that's true. It's for an organism to do well, it has to have the right genes for its environment, and it has to have a healthy environment. That's yeah. So getting just the local ecotype bee is not sufficient. We have
But
to take care of the environment.
today, I see in Italy, for example, they speak about the local bee like a solution of all the problems. They don't speak that the bees they don't have nutrition. So
Yeah, I guess that's very interesting. Yeah, because in most places, in many parts of the world, the environment is a huge problem for lack of good nutrition in the middle, the big agricultural areas in the center of U.S., that's very much the case. And there's also the problems of pesticides, just killing bees. So, yeah, that I guess that's going to be, you'd have to say this is an issue that's a work in progress. But the beekeepers can be seems like the beekeepers should be the spokespersons for these issues.
In Italy, for example, it's not like that. I can say that the beekeeping association, they work together with the people that make bad agriculture. And for example, when they use a pesticide, they send a message to the beekeeping association. The beekeeping association send another message to the beekeepers and say, you need to move your colony. They don't say, no, you don't need to use the pesticide because it's not good. They say you need to move your colonies. It's
yeah, well, maybe I guess.
I don't know if in the US it's working like that. I hope it's not like that.
It's probably very similar.
Okay.
The beekeepers are expected to move the bees out of the environment where they would be exposed to the pesticide.
Do you really believe that if the bees died, the world will collapse?
Well, it depends. We know that there's been a lot of good studies that show that just one species of bee, Apis mellifera, provides the pollination services for 50% of our food supply. So, yes, if things got so bad that we could not keep colonies of honeybees alive, and I don't think that will happen in general, but it can happen in certain locations. If that were to happen, we would not be able to produce the fruits and vegetables, which are the really healthy parts of our diet. The plants that produce our food that require a pollinator.
Yes.
That they would become in very short supply. Yeah, it's I live in a state, New York State, which produces lots of apples. It's a big apple. It's one of our biggest industries, is producing apples.
Mm-hmm.
And the apple growers are now working very closely with the beekeepers to coordinate on when the bees are present and for the pollination and when they start the spraying. Because they don't have to start the spraying when the trees are in flower. They start the spraying. They can start it after that. So I guess that's an example of where we can have it both ways.
Okay.
Yeah. So that maybe we can. Those are of course technical solutions, but that's the nature of. That's how agriculture works now. To feed everybody, it has to be done in a very almost industrial scale, at least here in North America.
We can say that the bees and the cuisine of the bees, the bumblebees, we have some industries that they are growing. They are very big.
Yeah, and are those the ones that I'm familiar with? Those are bumblebee colonies that are produced for pollinating in greenhouses.
Yes.
Or glass houses, whatever you want to call them.
Yes.
Yeah, and there I guess those are, I guess, the benefits there are that I think they don't have to put as many herbicides or pesticides on the plants because the plants are protected from pest insects. Probably not against aphids though. So yeah, I'm not sure how that works. What the pesticide issue is in that situation.
Yes.
So I take your point too that the honeybees are lucky they can be moved out of an area where there's spraying with pesticides, but all the other bees aren't. That's their home.
Yes,
they're
yes,
exposed.
yes. The beekeeping, it's helping all the world for the food supplies and this stuff here. But the beekeeping also kills all the wild bees, if you can say.
Hmm.
Because when you
Yeah,
put 100 colonies in one region, you have only bees, and the wild colonies, they don't have nothing to eat.
yeah, that's going to depend on the particulars of the location. People have looked at, again, in the area. The example I know best is the apple orchards, the large apple orchards in New York State, and they are finding that the solitary bees and the bumblebees, um, they are not um, they are not declining in numbers as beekeepers bring in honeybees, and it's because um, they're using a, they're using a wider range of flower sources than the honeybees do. The honeybees, as you know, they're really a honeybee colony is designed through its social organization to focus its foragers on the one richest source of nectar or pollen available that day. And so when the apple orchard is in full bloom, basically every honeybee is on the apple trees.
Yes,
But the
yes.
little wild bees and the bumblebees, they keep poking around and going off the orchard and into the other places or nearby. So I think this has been studied by a fellow professor here at Cornell with his students, um, and he's finding that, to his surprise, bringing in honeybee colonies for pollination did not reduce the diversity or abundance of the wild bees. But that's here in New York State, where we have a lot of wild land around the orchards, brushy
Okay.
places. And probably I imagine it's different in Italy.
Okay. Yes, because I read some studies that they say that the wild colonies, they are of wild bees colony, they are
Yeah.
how can I say, it's very hard when beekeepers come with 100 hives in a region for this type of bees.
Yeah, I can see that could certainly be the case, because honeybees range so widely, 10 kilometers from their hive, sometimes even more. So 100 colonies, each of them sending out bees over an area with a radius of 10 kilometers. Yeah, they're going to soak up probably most of the food that's available.
And okay, I think that you write a book every 10 years. It's true.
Correct.
You want to
Yeah.
speak a little bit about your new book that I gonna buy the book in English.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And thank you for asking. It's a book that's different from the previous books. Um, it's called Bee Works, and the aim of this book is to write 20 short stories of scientific discovery that I've done, and the focus is not on the ecology of honeybees. It's on their social behavior. So each chapter addresses one investigation that I've done on this or that aspect of what is just the amazingly sophisticated social behavior of honeybees. So I'm not talking about the behavior of how they fly to and from their nest, things like that. It's things like how they ventilate their nest, how they choose their home site, how they organize their food collection, how they turn up and turn down their selectivity when they're foraging, and how all these other signals that they have, a buzz run signal, a shaking signal, a beep signal, So this is a book of stories of discovery, not all entirely by me, of course, but
Yes.
a book of discoveries about the just amazing behavioral abilities of the worker honeybee. And it is, so the focus of this book is what worker honeybees can do, and just how mind blowing it is that it's just this little insect. But of course, it's not just any little insect. It's an insect with a brain that's got approximately 1 million neurons. This is the real. This is the human. The worker honeybee is like, if you look at its brain compared to its body, it's kind of like humans. We've got big heads with big brains, and that's what the worker honeybee has compared to a bumblebee or any of the solitary bees. It's a very smart animal, and it's just like us. Our brains got big when we became social. We are social. We are the social ape, the most social of the apes. We've had to really learn how to organize and communicate and do all those fancy things that we do. Same with the worker honeybee. So that's what this book is about. Works of analysis of the just amazing behavior of the worker honeybee. When you think, and just think about it. Think about all the differences in terms of behavioral complexity between a drone and a worker bee.